For the better half of around 4 months now, there has been no other game that has managed to capture my attention and keep me so invested in what's happening like Balatro does. I don't know if it's a combination of the addictive nature of the game, the rather simple yet stunning visuals, or the masterfully written soundtrack, but whatever it is, I keep coming back for more. Sometimes I see posts on places like Reddit talking about the game's lore as well as the references to a lot of different things in game, and it got me wondering just how many references Balatro actually has. So in this video, I'm going to try and cover all of the references I can find, as well as their interpretations, as some of the jokers potentially could reference multiple things. There's a very real chance that I might miss something in this video, as there are quite a lot of jokers, so if I do miss even the most minute of details somewhere, then feel free to let me know about it in the comments. Also, we're going to talk about unused content as well. I don't know what I'm going to title this video, so I'm just going to say it here. I've decided to go in order of how the jokers are displayed on the Balatro wiki, but I want to talk about the actual word Balatro first. What does that even mean? Well, when Locothunk was brainstorming name ideas for his game, some initial title ideas were ones like Trial of the Joker, Rogue Poker, Cartomancer's Hold'em, Rogue Hold'em, Hand of the Fool, Hyperborean Hold'em, and Foolish Poker. Joker Poker and Fool's Gambit got really close to becoming the official title, but was ultimately outdone by Balatro. That's cool, but what is a Balatro? A Balatro is an ancient Roman term meaning jester or joker. This title not only rolls off the tongue far better than all of the others, but it also still makes sense, which is just nice. I might make a separate video on this if enough unused stuff makes its way into the files, but I do want to quickly address this stuff. Starting with these unused decks. Some of this stuff wasn't always unused, as is evident by their presence in earlier game footage, but this deck here, being the braided deck, would have been unlocked after finding at least 130 items from your collection, with the deck's gimmick being that your most played hand always started at level 3. Not entirely sure why it was removed. I'm guessing that Locothunk didn't find it interesting enough to keep it in. Being unlocked after finding 170 collectibles, the silver deck would start your runs out with a random joker, which honestly sounds like a cool concept, but only if you're playing on any stake under black stake. I don't believe this deck made it past the closed beta in 2023, and so maybe I'm wrong about this, but I'm guessing that the deck would sometimes give you eternal, perishable, and even rental jokers, right? If that's true, that sounds kind of annoying to reset into an eternal that you can't get rid of. As for why it was removed though, my guess is as good as yours. Foil deck was likely removed for the same reason as the braided deck. All this one did was add foil to 3 random cards. Requiring 180 unlocks, this deck doesn't seem like it was interesting enough to be kept in. Holographic deck does the same thing here, but adds 3 holos instead, and requires 190 unlocks. And lastly, there's the Polychrome deck. Requiring 200 unlocks, all this one did was add Polychrome to 1 random card. So it was pretty innovative. Balatro has a ton of very useful vouchers. Ranging from subtracting an ante to getting an extra joker slot, the game has 6 extra vouchers that aren't used anymore. Magnet made it so that the most played card in your run was always drawn to your hand at the start of the round, with the upgraded Electromagnet, unlocking after playing 1 card at least 10 times in a run, changes this to your 3 most played cards instead. Pattern would spawn your most used Tarot or Planet card, but not the most used card in that run. It would spawn your all-time most used Tarot or Planet card, with the upgraded Tessellation, unlocked after buying the Polychrome variant of your most used Joker in the shop, would instead spawn your all-time used Joker into your run. And lastly, arguably as overpowered as the previous voucher, Silver Spoon would start your next run with a bonus of $5. Using the voucher in 3 consecutive runs unlocked the upgraded Heirloom, which increased this to $15 of bonus money on the next run after the run where you collected the vouchers. That is insane. These vouchers were very obviously removed due to how they were kind of breaking up the isolation that single runs have in Balatro. It makes sense why Locothunk would remove vouchers that seep their way out of an individualized run and into others, but with the Magnet voucher, I'm pretty sure this was taken out for balancing reasons, as Electromagnet, while not broken like the others, is still a pretty powerful voucher all things considered. Of all 150 jokers the game has to offer, only one extra joker remains in the game files. Designed by Lumpy Touch, the same artist who designed Vagabond, also made the design for this. There is nothing known about this Joker, and nobody even knew what it was called until it was revealed to be called Chaos Theory by the designer in a YouTube short. Other than that though, there's no other information about what this Joker does, or why it's dormant in the game files, or why it's the only one. The first Joker in the game is sometimes referred to as Jimbo, but why is that? During the tutorial, the Joker that guides you through the basics says his name is Jimbo, and since it looks the same as the first Joker card that there is, many people associate the Joker card with being Jimbo. According to LocalThunk though, this doesn't seem to be the case. It's uncertain if he's trolling or not here, but what is certain is that Jimbo's real name is Gary McCready, with him being from Logansport, Indiana. Another crucial detail about Jimbo is that not only is he a big fan of the Indiana Pacers, but he's also forklift certified as well. There's likely an underlying reference here that I'm failing to see, but opening the location on Google Maps shows a large billboard with Gary's face on it, so that's kinda cool. Aside from being obviously references to gestures themselves, the first Jokers to reference anything else are, sorry Jimbo, the first 4 other Jokers being the Sin Jokers. I say sin because their names are a direct reference to the 7 deadly sins, in this case being greed, lust, wrath, and gluttony. Hopefully LocalThunk implements the other 3 at some point. I'm curious to see what an envious Joker would be like. Envy in other games I've played seems to be about breaking down, so I wonder how applicable a concept like that could be to a Joker. A sloth Joker sounds like it would just be lazy and only sometimes work. And a pride Joker would probably make a Joker beside it incompatible or something. Not the most innovative ideas, but those are what immediately come to my head. The next 10 Jokers, from Jolly Joker to Crafty Joker, don't really have any significant references to them other than what they directly do. Same thing also applies to Half Joker as well as Joker Stencil. 4 Fingers is a bit more on the nose, directly referring to how in poker, sets of cards are called hands. And in this case, the Joker works for straights as well as flushes. A hand that normally requires 5 cards, 5 fingers a hand, into only needing 4, which with 4 fingers would still be a full hand. Make sense? It's also thought that the artwork for the card is not only a nod to how often cartoon characters usually have 4 fingers on each hand, but is also a direct reference to the Lost meme that started all the way back in 2008 on 4chan. And I mean, I'm not saying it's not similar, and I'm also not saying that LocalThunk implicitly confirmed its canon in a tweet back in February. But what I am saying is that I'm pretty sure this is just a striking coincidence, and that it's far more likely to have been inspired by cartoon hands. Credit card is far less obvious than 4 Fingers in that while it might look like a boring old credit card, there are a couple of references here. The name on the... Actually, hold on, let me flip this. Okay. The name on the card being J. Joker Jr. unfortunately doesn't reference anything, at least from what I can find, but the card number totally does. Kind of a dated reference, but this set of numbers, 8675309, is a direct reference to the 1981 song by Tommy Two Tone with the same name. The name Jenny in the music video might have also given LocalThunk the idea to use that name in other parts of the game that I'll talk about later. The rest of the numbers have meaning too, with the 4269 referencing internet humor, and with the final 1234 just being what placeholder credit cards have on them a lot of the time. I actually found a Reddit post on the Balatro subreddit of a guy who made his actual real-life card look like the credit card from the game, which I thought was pretty cool. Ceremonial Dagger, as well as its functionality, ties directly into real sacrificial culture from the real world. And aside from being an obvious reference to that, it's thought that the card's design might have been loosely inspired by the Ceremonial Dagger from Risk of Rain 2. And I mean, yeah, it does look pretty similar. It doesn't do exactly the same thing that it does in Balatro, but regardless, I wouldn't be surprised if LocalThunk drew inspiration. The loyalty card has a very obvious nod. Sometimes when you go to certain places to eat, or in my personal experience when I'm getting a haircut, they give you a loyalty card that gets hole punched every time you get food or a haircut or whatever else. I don't know what happened to my loyalty card because I always lose it, but when you fill out all the holes, you usually get a reward which is typically a certain % off or a free item or whatever. And in Balatro's case, the reward is ×4 mult for every 6 hands that you play. Misprint is not only a clear nod to how things like Pokemon cards can rarely have misprints that oftentimes actually increase the value tremendously, but it was also a little too broken during the playtesting builds. I think it's hilarious that this was a thing, but misprint was actually capable of giving negative flat mult in the playtesting build of the game. As funny as this was though, it did deservingly get changed for it to be impossible to give a number lower than 0. Aside from that, there is one more hidden functionality of misprint that actually blew my mind. It might be a little more known about now, but you know that random string that the card sometimes shows in its description? That actually has a meaning. So in this case, misprint is giving me this string. We can ignore the stuff on the left as it doesn't matter here, but the 10S is referring to the 10 of spades that I haven't drawn. That 10 of spades directly correlates to the card that's at the top of my deck. So when I discard this, that's right, there's that 10 of spades. I don't think anyone is actually crazy enough to optimize this mechanic, but there do exist scenarios where doing this could actually help you, like with scoring the hand you're trying to get. Face cards, as well as the ace, are also not displayed with letters, but rather the numbers 11 to 14. If anyone's actually had this save a run or had this help them in any tremendous way, I would love to know what the scenario was because this is just so fascinating. Raised Fist, adding double the rank of the lowest ranked card in your hand to your mult, is a direct reference to the empowerment of the lower class in socialist and communist ideologies. I was initially confused by this Joker for some reason, so I'll briefly show it in execution. The lowest card held in my hand is this 3 of diamonds, so the Joker is going to add +6 mult to my score. Pretty simple to understand, so I don't know why I didn't get it at first. Chaos the Clown, being a common Joker that gives you a free shop reroll, has what I think might be a reference to The Simpsons. It's likely a subtle inspiration for the design, but I can't help but think of Krusty the Clown whenever I look at the card. Surely I can't be the only one who sees it, right? You might already be familiar with Fibonacci's mathematical reference if you did better than I did in math, but it's still probably not immediately obvious to the average player. The card's functionality is entirely built around the Fibonacci sequence, being a mathematical pattern in which the next number following a sequence is always the current and previous numbers put together, being a reoccurring theme commonly found all throughout the world. The sequence is most commonly observed going from 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, and so on. In Balatro's case, the sequence includes the ace and goes ace, 2, 3, 5, and 8. The sequence created by this is also sometimes called the golden ratio, if you've ever heard that before. I always thought that Scary Face had to have been referencing at least something, and to my surprise, it actually has 2 references, with one of them being accidental. The intended reference that Locothunk was nodding at was from the game Nuclear Throne. Scary Face, as well as its functionality, most likely comes from horror, from Nuclear Throne, which has a special ability that deals 30 damage per second. Scary Face gives 30 chips every face card scored, and whether that number is coincidental, it really seems like a clear inspiration to me. The accidental reference comes from Locothunk not even realizing that in poker, scare cards are cards that when showing up in hand have the potential to dramatically increase the power of said hand, with this usually happening with face cards. Hack is a Joker that re-triggers every play 2, 3, 4, and 5. Why does that matter? The low number repetitions that re-trigger from the card refers to how in comedy, comedians who reuse and steal jokes, as well as comedians who are generally painfully mediocre, are called hacks in the comedy world.
You're a fucking hack! Sorry.
A funny design inspiration that really caught me off guard is Local Thunk's loose inspiration. Most people see this and think of Arthur Fleck, which likely was a reference image, but some of it was also inspired by Joe Rogan. I thought this might have been inspired by the dumpster fire that was his Burn the Boat special, but that came out in August of last year. The sweat from Joe's shirt when he does sets was what gave Local Thunk the idea to make the comedian on the card have sweat stains as well. Really, this is just a funny thing that I had no idea about until I started researching this video. Pareidolia is the Joker that considers all cards to be face cards. Pareidolia itself is a psychological phenomena that makes us commonly see faces by simple pattern recognition. That kind of pattern recognition obviously isn't limited to just faces, but pareidolia itself is the condition specifically about facial recognition throughout nature. And speaking of nature, Gros Michel, which is French for Big Mike, used to be the most prevalent species of banana consumed on Earth. It's less favorable in today's society because of how susceptible they were to primarily a condition called Panama disease caused by a soil fungus. And despite its pros like how durable they were when transporting them, they were eventually phased out in favor of the Cavendish banana instead. And if you've played Balatro before, you would probably know that once the Gros Michel goes extinct in your run, Cavendish is then discoverable in the item pool. So apparently, even Steven giving +4 molt when scoring these numbers is a direct reference to the saying with the same name. The saying refers to when perfectly equally splitting things, like a cake, a pizza, a sandwich, or whatever. Odd Todd is similar, and from what I've been able to gather, the name is usually given to people who are, well, odd Todds. Local Thunk might have gotten the idea from several different places, but he most likely got it from the Even Steven and Odd Todd math book by Catherine Cristaldi from April 1996. There's also a character in a show called Odd Squad with the same name, but the reason I think he might have gotten the idea from the book is because it names both Even Steven and Odd Todd in the title. The Joker also has purposefully inconsistent features. Isn't that odd? I don't need to explain what Scholar does, but there is something funny about it, and that has to do with the sprite. So according to the Balatro wiki, this Joker sprite actually has 2 missing pixels on the E and the K of the first and second Joker words. I don't even understand how people find this kind of stuff, but sure enough, I checked, and these 2 pixels that are flashing on the screen are missing from only this Joker, at least from what I've seen. You know, I thought the game was perfect until I saw this, and I don't think I want to play it anymore. This Joker, though, has a much less obvious reference. If you've been on the internet for a while, then you might remember when American Psycho was getting really heavily memed. Well, if you've seen the film, you might understand what I'm about to bring up. There's a scene where Patrick Bateman is showing off business cards with his coworkers, and this shot specifically is where Local Thunk got the design idea for the Joker. Of course, he didn't include any other details other than name and position, but nevertheless, the inspiration couldn't be more clear. If you haven't seen American Psycho before, it's an excellent film, and memes aside, I highly recommend giving it a watch. Though I will tell you, it is very gruesome, so you have been warned. Egg is one of those Jokers that I either pick up for temperance value or to just simply sell it later for the extra money. The actual Joker itself, though, is a reference to 2 separate things. The theme of Egg comes from nest egg, which refers to an amount of money being saved for whatever the purpose is, usually investments or financial reservation for the future. The second reference is more known about and is a direct reference to the streamer Northern Lion. The Steam achievement for getting more than $400 in a single run also nods to this being named Nest Egg. Runner is a Joker that gains 15 ships for every time you play a straight, and the card is themed around a runner because in a large number of card games, straights are referred to as runs instead. The 345 tag is also a straight, albeit a short one at that. When you have Splash in Balatro, it makes every card count when you play a hand. And in poker, splashing the pot is kind of a similar thing, involving throwing chips into the money pot instead of just putting them in front of yourself. This is universally considered to be bad etiquette since it not only makes it harder to know the exact bet, but it also just kind of screws with the flow of the game. A superposition in Balatro creates a tarot card if a played hand contains an ace and a straight. But in quantum mechanics, a superposition is a quantum system's ability to exist in multiple different states simultaneously until a measurement is made. I know nothing about quantum mechanics, so I can't reliably dive into the specifics of this, but what I can tell you is that in the game, aces can be used as the highest card in a straight, but also can be used to make a low straight. The artwork of the Joker illustrates this with an electron, demonstrating how aces can make either high straights or low straights. That's a super cool inspiration, but I'm still gonna neglect superposition unless I'm on higher stakes. Sorry buddy, you deserve better. Sorry, I'm just hating, there's nothing wrong with this Joker. Card Sharp's most obvious nod is towards people in poker who often use deceptive skills to win, who in poker are called card sharks. The artwork of the Joker leaves a lot more questions than answers though. We know that, while unconfirmed by Local Thunk, the general outfit here comes from a poker player named Phil Lack, with his outfit coining him the nickname of this guy, who I don't know if I can say without getting demonetized. The reason people call Phil the nickname this guy has is because the police sketches of him look very similar to not only Lack's styling, but also the Card Sharp Joker itself. Simply Googling Card Shark doesn't come up with anything related to Phil Lack or even Ted, so without direct confirmation from Local Thunk, it's only a guess that this is where Card Sharp's inspiration is from. The inspiration for Red Card could come from a myriad of different places. My guess is of course as good as any, with mine coming from the general consensus about it being from poker itself, and sports actually. Red cards in sports are far less likely to be where this came from, so I'm just going to rule that one out in favor of the other. Red cards in this context are a blackjack thing and not from poker, usually being a thicker, plastic card used for splitting the deck, or just marking where to split it. The one in this example isn't red, but its functionality remains the same. I really want to make an even Steven remark here, but I'm just going to leave it. When I first saw the Riff Raff Joker, I immediately thought of the musical artist with the same name. There might be a possibility that Local Thunk knows who Riff Raff is, but it's far more likely that the idea for the Joker's name comes from the word Riff Raff, meaning disreputable or undesirable people, which might explain why Riff Raff only creates Jokers with the common rarity. The functionality of Vampire is very reminiscent of vampires in mythology. Sucking the enhancement off of cards, only getting stronger as a result, is pretty much how it works with more traditional vampires, except of course they suck blood as a life force. The synergy this Joker has with Midas Mask is not only one of the most fun combos to play with, but the community also apparently calls this a JoJo reference. As in the show, Dio Brando apparently transforms into a vampire with what I'm guessing is the stone mask seen here. In the case that I'm wrong here, JoJo fans can yell at me in the comments about it, I haven't seen the show. And since we're already talking about Midas Mask, I might as well also inform you that it comes from a king of Greek mythology named King Midas, who is most remembered by his ability to make anything he touched into gold, commonly being called Midas Touch. This came as a result of wishing that anything he touched turned into gold, with the god of wine, Dionysus, granting his wish, while at the same time cursing him. Whether it was meant to be a curse or not, it's commonly seen that way as Midas's wish shows a clear display of his greed. Shortcut doesn't really have any direct references to it, but I do want to bring attention to what I read on the wiki about it. So apparently, the artwork of this Joker actually includes a Joker face. The wires are the smile, and the cloud represents a hat. I can obviously see the smile with the wires, but I think I'm just way too blind to see what the rest of this is meant to subtly resemble. I'm likely not the only one who doesn't see this either. I guess just let me know if I'm blind or not. Along with being one of the only Jokers in the game that wasn't designed by Local Thunk, rather Lumpy Touch in this case, Vagabond in Balatro makes a tarot card if you play a hand while having $4 or less. Vagabonds in real life are people who often wander from place to place, usually not having a set place to live or a set place to work either. There's also a manga with the same name, which only makes me wonder, what could Vagabond have been like had its inspiration come from this instead? No idea. Cloud 9 is often a term used to describe being in a state of euphoria or tranquility, but in Balatro's case, it serves as a pretty okay econ joker. There's one other thing I noticed that's not related to its initial reference, but rather has to do with the clouds on the card. If you count the clouds, there's exactly 9 of them in the artwork. Nice job, Local Thunk, you odd Todd. I wouldn't want this texture any other way. Luchador, as well as Matador, both do a pretty good job at incorporating Mexican and bullfighting culture. Starting with Luchador, the word luchador is Spanish for fighter or wrestler, with it specifically talking about Mexican wrestlers in the context of professional wrestling under the sport of lucha libre. The first thing I thought of when learning about luchadors was Rey Mysterio, who is thought to be one of the greatest luchadors of all time. I also used to watch WWE all the time like 12 years ago, so that's why he came to mind. A matador, while also a Spanish word, is quite different. The word literally translates to killer, with matadors in bullfighting being the main bullfighter, who are meant to ultimately kill the bull with a sword. Matador's functionality in Balatro has apparently caused quite a bit of confusion. All the Joker does is give money every time the boss blind is triggered, which isn't that difficult to understand, at least in my opinion. But regardless, in an interview with Bloomberg in February, Local Thunk said that he, quote, plans to overhaul the confusing Matador Joker. The update still hasn't came out yet at the time of me writing this, so I'm pretty curious to see how this Joker will get changed when the update comes out. Photograph is interesting. Of course it takes direct inspiration from Polaroids, or really any kind of camera that makes film like this, and the art itself is one out of the 4 Jokers in the game that has a unique shape not like a traditional card. My initial interpretation of the art when I first saw it was a guy in a warmly lit bar holding up cards to have his picture taken, when really it's far more likely to be Jimbo sitting on the other end of a poker table. There's also a well-known Joker combo with Photograph and Hanging Chad called Photo Chad. We'll talk more about Hanging Chad later, but I bring up Photo Chad because 1, it's a solid combo that's strengthened my runs numerous times, and 2, maybe some of you have heard this term before and might have been confused as to what it actually is. Reserved Parking is an honestly pretty good econ Joker if you have a Baron or Shoot the Moon build going, but the exact sign that the Joker was inspired by wasn't figured out only until quite recently. I don't know if you can still buy this as the webpage for it is archived, but if you really wanted to, I'm sure you could find someone that would print the sign out for you. Actually, better yet, someone should make a 1-to-1 scale sign with the Joker artwork on it and put it somewhere, I don't know. It might make for a good background piece on a face cam or something, but I don't know, I'm just talking, man, let's keep going. The strength of econ Jokers heavily depend on the build you're using, but my personal favorite one might have to be Mail and Rebate. The card itself, though, clearly has some kind of reference on the letter itself. The letter's addressed to Jack Joker, but the address, though, is the interesting part. 129 West 81st Street, 5A, New York, New York, 10024. Clearly being a reference to something, if you look this address up, it turns out to be the same address of Jerry's apartment from the show Seinfeld. It's very obvious what this one is, but To the Moon's functionality is kind of identical to the effect that the term refers to in real life. I don't know why I'm even explaining this one, but usually when a stock or a cryptocurrency shoots way up, sometimes people say that said asset is going to the moon. This Joker gives you an extra $1 of interest for every $5 you have, and it's not identical obviously, but the effect does make sense for the Joker's structure. Fortune Teller in Balatro gives you +1 molt for every tarot card you use in a run. Why does this matter? The Joker's idea comes straight from the fact that Fortune Tellers typically use the same kind of tarot cards that exist in Balatro and many other games. I don't fully understand tarot cards or palm reading in real life, so if anyone feels like explaining the basics to me in the comments, I'd be open to hearing about it. Lucky Cat is another fairly obvious reference, but for those who don't know, the cat on the Joker artwork is a Maneki Neko, being these cat figures that are based off the Japanese bobtail cat. These are common in Asian culture and are believed to give good luck to whoever owns one. Personally, I see these in Asian restaurants all the time, so that's how I know about them, and it's also why I didn't initially feel like explaining this one, but I'm doing it anyway. Bull is a joker that, like with a number of other people, had a reference that I couldn't figure out until just now. The bull in Balatro gives 2 chips for every dollar you have, and as for its inspiration, bull is generally accepted to be a direct reference to a bull market, which is a period of time in an economy where prices of things generally start to rise, usually starting when stocks rise 20% from their low. Diet Cola gives you a double tag in the game when you sell the Joker, and its inspiration likely comes from a number of things. The first diet drink ever produced by the Coca-Cola company was this, being called a tab, which actually was pretty popular throughout the 60s and 70s, offering itself as an alternative to regular Coca-Cola. The release of Diet Coke in 1982 pretty much caused this to slowly become entirely obsolete before its discontinuation in December 2020. Wow, that's very recent. I thought it would have went bust in the 90s or something. The thought here is that the word tab is very close to the word tag, so that's where Locothunk drew the idea to make Diet Cola give you a double tag. The other reference is far more assumed, revolving around the fact that bottle caps kind of already represent tags, whether custom made or just by themselves off whatever drink. I mean, I guess that makes sense. Something that's also cool about all of the food and drink items in the game is that Locothunk purposefully tried to make the items globally recognizable. You know, ice cream, soda, popcorn. I think he did a pretty good job. Ancient Joker is the only Joker in the game that personally gives me an excuse to make my entire deck wildcards given the chance. The artwork itself, though, is equally as interesting, if not more. I've made a lot of jokes about the face on stream before, but the face itself does come from an artwork made by a streamer named Michael Fox. The face itself is called an Olbop, with the face itself apparently just being what Michael draws a lot on stream when playing games that require drawing and that sort of thing. I believe the origin of this face comes from the Northern Lion live super show from October 6th, 2016, when this was drawn at around 2.5 hours into the stream. Comparing it directly with Ancient Joker's sprite, the similarity is then pretty obvious. Michael's reaction to finding it for the first time is also pretty awesome to watch.
Hey Daddy-o, this... It's our Joker, finally! Let's go! It is him! That's Olbap, chat. That's our Joker. 16 hours later.
Walkie-talkie's reference is honestly incredibly obvious in hindsight. The Joker itself gives plus 10 chips and plus 4 molt whenever a 10 and a 4 is scored. A pretty neutral and okay Joker, right? While the 10 and 4 tropes are the way they are solely because of how people, in this case US law enforcement, use the phrase 10-4 to confirm that they've understood a message sent through a walkie-talkie. Yeah, I don't know how I didn't get that. Gotta love a good econ Joker, and Golden Ticket is surely no exception. I think it's one of the best looking Jokers, along with being incredibly satisfying to use, giving $3 every time a gold card is played. But what is this? Surely that series of numbers means something, right? Seems really random. If we've learned anything from Locothunk though, it's anything but calculated. 16180339. I don't know if any of you are math buffs or anything, but you might recognize this number as being the first digits of none other than the golden ratio. Of course there is a decimal point right after the first digit, but that doesn't take away from yet another thoughtful reference that I bet only a small percentage of people would initially understand. I don't know a single thing about what's even considered advanced math, so I didn't know about this one until finding it out here. There's not a whole lot to say about Mr. Bones. I have seen myself in situations where it has saved a run, and I certainly can't fault it for that. Something that surprised me though is that even a Joker like this is referencing something. Some of you might have seen this from a mile away, but according to Logothunk's own words, Mr. Bones is inspired by Mr. Bones' Wild Ride from Roller Coaster Tycoon that ended up becoming a popular meme back in the mid-2010s. If you've been on the internet for a while, then you've surely at least heard of this before. If not though, the ride was basically a kill coaster that started on a 4chan board in 2012. it pretty much took off from there. While I don't fully understand its correlation to the Joker's functionality, Sock and Buskin I think has a more recognizable inspiration, being theater. Sock and Buskin itself are ancient theater symbols of Talia and Melpomene, representing both comedy and tragedy alike. Along with being one of my favorite Jokers in the game, Sock also generally gives off big yin-yang energy with its super well-designed artwork. While not confirmed, Throwback's artwork is likely to be inspired by the aesthetic of the 1980s, with similar designs being ones found on VHS tape boxes and things of that sort. The specific design in this instance has to be the Memphis design style, which features the same squiggly lines, sharp shapes, vibrant colors, and generally fun atmosphere, at least in my opinion. The squiggly lines are more like Cheeto Puffs on the Joker's texture, but the intention is clear. Earlier I said I'd be talking more about this Joker later, and the time is now for Hanging Chad. I already expressed how fun the Photo Chad combo is, and this Joker itself has its inspirational ties actually to the American election of 2000. Okay, so when a physical ballot has a hole punched through it and it doesn't fall all the way off, that piece of paper hanging from the rest is called a Chad. You could probably see where this is going, right? Hanging Chads were apparently a huge problem in the election of 2000, causing multiple recounts of votes and eventually even requiring a court decision on what should and shouldn't be counted. I don't think I could show a video clip of the show, but in Season 7, Episode 6 of How I Met Your Mother, Ted Mosby brought a costume to a Halloween party that is literally, it's a Hanging Chad. Also, can we just talk about how perfect it is that the word Joker perfectly fits into not only the card's vertical height, but also the shaping? Satisfyingly designed, if you ask me. These four symbols, by the way, are also binary for the numbers 1, 2, 4, and 5. 3 is, of course, presumably hidden underneath the Hanging Chad. Bloodstone is either somewhat reliable or does completely nothing, depending on how lucky you get. The Joker has a 1 in 2 chance to give 1.5 times mole for every heart card that's played, for those who aren't aware, and Bloodstones themselves are actually real. Bloodstone is just the nickname given to its real counterpart, as they're actually called heliotropes. The red spots are not blood, but are actually tiny inclusions of iron oxide inside what is a bigger portion of usually dark green jasper. Maybe I'll go start digging in my backyard to find some. Mary Andy has a pretty simple functionality, giving 3 extra discards with the trade-off of losing 1 hand size. Much like Mary Andrews in real life, which are jesters who give a constant stream of jokes, Mary Andy works similarly by giving a constant, albeit very finite, amount of discards. It's okay though, we forgive you. I'm still going to use you to milk as many purple seals as I can. This one's been known about for a while now, but Oops All Sixes has a reference that will only likely be picked up by Americans, or really anyone who lives in the West. Ignoring Joker functionality, doubling all listed probabilities, the Joker's name is a reference to... Actually, you know what? Hold on. I don't even think I need to explore. I've honestly literally never even used Seeing Double in a run yet. I've seen no reason to pick it up, but that's just me. The footage of me using it here is actually the first time I've ever used it. The Joker itself, though, gives you ×2 molt if you play a hand that has at least 1 club card in it. I just lied for no reason. The name for the Joker apparently came from a 2002 album with the same name by a British pop band called S Club 7, which I'm assuming is what inspired the Joker to revolve around the club suit. I mean, at least that's what Localthunk said about it back in 2023. Hit the Road is almost the same as Seeing Double in terms of inspiration, this time coming from a single instead of an album, being the 1961 song called Hit the Road, Jack by Ray Charles and Percy Mayfield. The Joker's functionality revolving around jacks makes a lot of sense now with that additional context. I was under the initial assumption that it was just a random decision by Localthunk, as apparently this Joker used to be called Hit the Road, Jack. Although it's surprisingly difficult to find a good picture of the whole outfit, Stuntman is yet another Joker that has ties into American culture. While its functionality of giving 250 chips with a -2 hand size isn't related to it, The Stuntman Joker is inspired by none other than Evel Knievel with his iconic star-spangled jumpsuit he'd often wear when performing various stunts. He had a number of helmets, but one with the stripe down the middle is ultimately how Local Thunk designed the helmet for Stuntman. Driver's License dives back into the lore inside of Balatro itself, with one exception that we'll get to in a second. Gotta rotate the Joker first. There we go. The Joker's functionality is that it gives ×3 mult if you have at least 16 enhanced cards in your deck. 16 cards could very well be a reference to how the common initial driving age is typically around 16 years old, but I'm more interested in what's on the actual sprite work here. Initially being named Jeb in early demo versions of the game, the name on the license appears to be Gen Joker, born on December 3rd, 1995. It's unsure what his birthday is, but this could either be a reference to something else in pop culture, Local Thunk's birthday, or just a completely unrelated day of 1995. Googling December 3rd, 1995 made me learn about a horrible plane crash that killed 71 people that day, as well as the US defeating Russia in tennis majors, so I'm not sure what the date represents on the artwork. If we've learned anything though, we do know that Local Thunk is way more calculated when it comes to this stuff, so only time will tell. The license is actually expired now. It expired on January 24th, so Jen might need to go to the DMV. While we're on the subject of Jen, Local Thunk has given us some nuggets of lore, I guess you could say. We know right now that Jen works in Aurora, Colorado, and has a degree from Lehigh University in electrical engineering. Sounds fun. Jen also takes the bus to her electrical engineering job, so maybe she doesn't have a car and relies on public transport. As an American, that sounds very refreshing, actually. Similar to the Bull Joker, Bootstraps too has ties into the world of finance in a way. Though not confirmed, Bootstraps is thought to correlate to either bootstrap funding or correlates to the phrase pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Bootstrap funding is a concept initially thought to be impossible. Originating in the 19th century, the most basic definition of bootstrapping is building an entire business from scratch without attracting investment. Examples of this include Craigslist, Patagonia, and even Dell and Amazon initially. At least according to an article on Investopedia, so take it from them, not me. And for the phrase, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, this is a more self-explanatory one, mainly referring to picking yourself back up through your own independence and self-reliance. Well, it's time to talk about the last 5 Jokers in the game, and I think you all know what remains. Every legendary in Balatro is based around some kind of jester, whether it be one that really existed to ones resulting from a work of fiction. Whatever the case, let's start with maybe the least liked. Canio, gaining ×1 mold every time a face card is destroyed, is based off of the real jester from an opera called Pagliacci. It tells of the tale of Canio, who murders his... Actually, should I spoil the play from 1892? That's fine. The tale of Canio tells of a story in which Canio murders his wife and her lover on stage during a performance. I'm not going to get into the super specifics of the play here, but yeah. Canio is based on a clown, not a jester in this case, from a work of fiction by Ruggero Leoncavallo. Triboulet is one of my favorite legendaries in the game. I do a lot of face card builds, so I'm always excited to see him. Triboulet itself, though, isn't exactly one non-fictional jester, but 3. There's hardly any biographical information about him, and all 3 of these jesters have their origins tied back to France. The first one served René of Anjou, who was this guy, in the 1400s as a jester and a playwright. The second one is more known about, serving Louis XII in the early 1500s, actually passing away during the king's reign. And the last one, often confused with the second, is the one who served King Francis I. Trib also appears in all of this legacy media. Triboulet's effect could be a reference to a famous story about the real Trib, about how after slapping the king's, the king told him that if he could give him an answer more offensive than what he did, he would be allowed to live. Triboulet then said, "I'm sorry, your majesty, I mistook you for the queen." This potentially could explain why Trib's effect applies to only kings and queens. My favorite Triboulet story is this one though. At some point during King Francis's reign, Trib was sentenced to death for mocking the king and the queen. Francis gave him free will to choose his method of death, in which Tribule responded by saying, "I ask to die from old age." This resulted in his life being spared, with him eventually dying of old age in 1536. Absolute legend. As long as you have the discards for it, Yorick is fun to play with. Gaining ×1 molt for every 23 discards, Yorick itself though has its ties into a work of Shakespeare. Yorick is an implied and unseen character in Hamlet, being the king's court jester, whose, spoilers, skull ends up being dug up and held in the hands of Hamlet in Act 5, Scene 1 of the play. But back to Balatro. Yorick's 23 discard functionality is also most likely inspired by this line in the play on Scene 1 of Act 5, saying, quote, "This skull has lain in the earth 23 years. Sir, this skull belonged to Yorick, the king's jester." Probably the least desirable legendary, Chico has a very simple effect, disabling the effect of every boss blind when you have it. This jester was a real living person named Jean-Antoine Dangoret, serving as the jester for King Henry III, and then later the Fourth. He was said to be sharp-tongued, very cunning, and spoke with the king without formalities, which could maybe be where the Joker's functionality comes from. This painting I've been showing, that's become a bit of a meme, is a painting of not Chico, but rather Stanchik, being the court jester when Poland was at the height of its Renaissance era, during the reign of King Sigismund I the Old, reigning from 1506 to 1548. Stanchik's origin has been highly debated upon, with his origin being the topic for an entirely different video. And last, but certainly not least, we have the one Joker who is capable of a particle accelerator build. Also, like with many, being one of my favorite Jokers in the game. Perkeo is yet another jester who was a real living person back in the 1700s. His name has been debated to be either Clemens Pankert or Giovanni Clementi, and was referred to as Perkeo of Heidelberg, being the court jester and Count Dwarf of Elector Palatine Charles Philip III in Heidelberg, Germany. Born in 1702, he was apparently affected by dwarfism, with its functionality in Balatro coming from his alleged insane alcohol resilience. It was said that he could allegedly consume anywhere between 5 to 8 gallons of wine a day. And just so it's not confusing, the correlation to Perkeo in the game, creating a negative consumable, therefore making infinite slots, ties into how the real Perkeo could apparently infinitely drink wine. Honestly though, I feel like I know people who could easily outdrink Perkeo. I don't really know how to end this video. I guess if there's any conclusion I've had making this is that I just love Balatro. Hopefully this comes out before the update that adds and balances stuff. I'm really interested to see how the game changes, especially since I can't imagine the game being any more perfect than I think it already is. Last thing I'll say before I go is that 1, you should subscribe to me. I'd love to try and hit 100k this year. And 2, somebody really needs to make an iceberg for this game. I think there's enough lore here that it's totally doable if someone or a group of people got together and just put in the work to make it happen. If an iceberg for this does exist and I'm just not aware, then please let me know in the comments and I'll go take a look at it. I gotta get going though. I've been building this thing on Minecraft for like a year and I'm so addicted to it that it's been taking over my life since 2024. I have to finish a storefront in Midtown, so I think I'm gonna go. Thanks for watching, everybody.